And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello everyone, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook. It is Friday, April 19th, and this is the weekend outlook coming up for Saturday into Sunday. And what we're going to see is this feed of moisture that's come in from the subtropics, this atmospheric river that has provided heavy rainfall around Kodiak Island. That's going to begin to break down and dissipate here on Saturday. We still have, though, IFR conditions associated with areas, a band of rain and rain showers in this region of the Gulf back toward Kodiak Island, IFR along and just off the Yukon Delta, Nunavik Island. There's going to be an area of low pressure just east of the Pribilovs that just slowly works its way westward. As the flow becomes more offshore along the west coast, conditions will be improving compared to what they were this past week. Some IFR along the eastern Arctic coast, especially Deadhorse to Kaktovik. But we still have the influence of this Canadian ridge of high pressure. Incredible weather this Friday afternoon. We're expecting temperatures well into the 60s. Thursday afternoon, Klawak had the state's high temperature of 68 degrees. That's 68. Very warm, even near 60 up toward Fairbanks as of this Friday afternoon. So VFR conditions across much of the mainland interior and panhandle continue into the day Saturday. We see that because the ridging influence. Again, the feed of moisture coming in from the North Pacific into the Southwest Gulf will begin to break down. Still some pockets of IFR along east side of Kodiak Island and up along the north end here of the Alaska Peninsula, and then back out here from St. Lawrence down to St. Matthew and through the north central Bering Sea. We expect IFR conditions Sunday morning. Still some areas of IFR out over the lower Gulf back toward as we get around Kodiak Island and then from around St. Lawrence to north of St. Matthew into the central Bering. The other thing of interest is by Sunday, we're going to have an area of low pressure coming out of the North Pacific, linking up with shortwave energy coming out of eastern Russia, and that'll spin up a pretty good low down around 970 millibars here across the lower southwest portion of the Bering Sea. This feature will gradually work its way eastward during the early portion of next week. It'll have wind and precipitation around it, so that'll have other impacts out there across the Aleutian chain and through the better portion of the central and lower Bering Sea. Sunday afternoon, though, we see some MVFR along the Gulf Coast into the Panhandle. As a little bit of moisture, there could be a few light showers make it up into areas of the Panhandle and along the Gulf Coast, especially Sunday afternoon and more likely as we get into early next week. Some pockets of IFR again from around Deadhorse, New Exit to Kaktovik, as well as lingering along the lower Yukon Delta coast through the Etolan Strait and outside of Bristol Bay. And then here's the hints of that front around that stronger low that'll be taking shape, IFR from the central Bering Sea down across the western central Aleutians. So past conditions, though, coming up for Saturday across much of the mainland, VFR conditions. I can just quickly go through this. Adigan Pass, much of the central eastern Brooks Range, VFR, Adigan as well, going down across the Alaska Range. Lake Clark, Merrill, VFR. A little south of there, though, south of Lake Clark, there could be some MVFR there through that portion of the lower end of the Alaska Range. But rounding up through the central Alaska Range, Rainy, Windy Pass, VFR. Going east of there, Isabel, on over toward Mentasta, VFR conditions, and just beautiful early spring weather. Tanita, VFR down across the Copper River Basin. Portage Pass, VFR, and then, of course, as we slide over through Yakutat, Chilkoot, White, all the way down south through the Panhandle, VFR. Very warm temperatures. Some areas are going to be in the 60s, so enjoy it because there'll be a bit of a change as that ridge breaks down, won't be quite as influential as we go into next week. So here's the consequence of that ridge of high pressure. Not only is it at the surface, but more importantly, mid and upper levels, because that's what helped drive some of the surface weather. We have freezing levels aloft above 8,000 feet here over parts of the Yukon and Northwest Territories in Northwest Canada, and then extending into the Yukon Valley above 6,000 and 4,000 feet, all the way out there toward the middle Yukon Valley. And then as we go behind me, here are the hints of that next low coming up out of the North Pacific that's going to join with energy coming down out of eastern Russia. So here's the frontal boundary with freezing levels aloft bumping up to 6,000 feet on Saturday morning there over the western Aleutians. Here are the areas that we could still see some pockets of moderate icing with that moisture feed toward Kodiak Island and just toward the entrance of Cook Inlet. Pocket or two west side of the Alaska Range west of Lake Iliamna, and then along the western coast areas around Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound, Lower Yukon Delta, Nunavik Island could have some areas of moderate icing, especially in clouds, thicker clouds above 5,000 feet, and then perhaps above 3,000 feet, northwest Arctic coast from around Point Lay up to Utqiagvik, and then here's the hint of some of the warmer air aloft, so the freezing levels will be higher with the likelihood of any icing getting above 10,000 feet there just to the southwest of the Aleutian chain. So here's that ridge. In the 30,000 feet aloft, we have this big 300 millibar ridge that extends across northwest Canada with the ridge axis into the central interior of Alaska. And then behind me, we have area of low circulation associated with a feature dropping in from eastern Russia, but the main low is still back out toward the southwest of the screen. 700 millibars, we can see that circulation here over the southwest Bering. Broader wind field upwards of 35, 45 knots, but then out here, lighter winds beneath the ridge axis, and still southeasterly, we have this band of southeasterly winds at 9,000 feet, 700 millibars, right around 30 to 40 knots from the Gulf back across the southwest interior. And then for Saturday, looking at where things stand, we still have some winds coming into the entrance there, Cook Inlet up over around Lake Iliamna. That's about it for much of the mainland. And then out here along the Russian coast, we have winds locally 35 to as high as 50 to even 65 miles an hour, but or knots rather, but that's quite a ways off. And looking where the greatest threat of turbulence then on Saturday, areas of the Gulf and southwest mainland. So the western Gulf along and just off of the Kenai, back through the lower portion, lower half or third of Cook Inlet, across Lake Iliamna into the southwest interior. There could be some areas of moderate turbulence, surface to 4,000 feet, and then extending out, begins to trail off. Some isolated moderate turbulence could extend down along the southwest coast of the lower Yukon, Kuskokwim deltas, including Nunavik Island.